A twist in a local race that could decide the balance of power in the nation's capital. One candidate doesn't live in the district he wants to represent, but the law says that's not a problem.
Illinois' 17th district race could be the state's only competitive congressional race. WIFR's Nathaniel Langley finds out if a revelation that some may find surprising will have any impact on the voters just 8 days before the election.
Representative Eric Sorensen can vote for himself in the 17th district race. His competitor, Judge Joe McGraw, won't be able to since he lives outside the district.
Shocked, kind of, well, if nothing else, disappointed.
More than they want Representative Eric Sorensen to beat Judge Joe McGraw, Stevenson County Democrats want a competitor who lives in their 17th district.
A person who is going to try to represent them in Congress doesn't live in their district and understand their issues.
At a campaign event on Monday, Judge Joe McGraw blamed the situation on Illinois' redistricting in 2020.
Otherwise known as gerrymandering. They drew the line right down the street in front of my house, leaving me out.
The U.S. Constitution allows anyone to run from anywhere in their home state for the House of Representatives.
Because it's not required. From me to you, it's how far I am out of the district.
Other local Democrats see history repeating itself.
Bobby Schilling was the last Republican who was not from the district or didn't live in the district when he ran, and he was out of touch, and he lasted one term. To run in the district, you should live in the district. If you're, sort of a carpetbagger, then what good is that?
Judge McGraw argues decades of connections run across the district, even if his address doesn't reflect that.
My life's work has been here. I've been here more continuously than Sorensen has. Coming up on 40 years.
Running for U.S. House and Senate are the only elected positions you can run from anywhere within your state. To serve in the Illinois legislature, you must live in the area you'll represent.
Thank you, Nathaniel. And WIFR reached out to Representative Eric Sorensen for comment. We did not hear back from his campaign team tonight.